The moment Walter Jameson stepped up to the defendant's table, the entire courtroom felt it. A 93-year-old man, shoulders slumped, hands trembling against the wood, eyes clouded not with age, but with fear. "I wasn't trying to break the law, Your Honor," he finally manages, his voice cracking under the weight of the truth. "I thought my son was dying." The words hit like a shockwave. Judge Frank Caprio freezes mid-sentence. His pen stops. His expression softens instantly, from routine professionalism to the unmistakable look of a man who has just heard a father's heartbreak. Slowly, carefully, he sets the pen down. "Mr. Jameson," Caprio says gently, "take your time. We're going to get through this together." Walter nods, but his hands keep shaking. He tries to speak again, but grief tightens around his throat, silencing him before the next word can come out. And this is where it begins. The moment a simple speeding ticket becomes something far more human, far more heartbreaking. Before we dive deep into this emotional story, you're watching Case Closed, where real moments, real people, and real compassion remind us what justice should look like. Hit subscribe so you never miss a story that touches the heart and restores your faith in humanity. He closes his eyes briefly, and when he opens them, they are wet. "I'm sorry," Walter says. I thought I was going to be too late." Caprio does not look away. He leans forward slightly, his elbows resting on the bench, his full attention on the old man standing before him. "Too late for what, sir?" Caprio asks. Walter's mouth works silently for a moment, his lips pressed together, his jaw tightens. He looks down at the table, at his own trembling hands, at the citation that sits in front of him like an accusation. "To see my boy," Walter whispers. "They called me. They said I needed to come now." The courtroom is silent. Not the ordinary silence of people waiting their turn, but the kind of silence that happens when everyone presents senses they are about to witness something that matters. 18 people sit in the gallery. A woman in the third row leans forward. A man near the aisle has his hands folded in front of him. Officer D'Angelo stands near the door, his posture respectful and still. Before you hear why this 93-year-old man was speeding, tell us where you're watching from. Caprio does not interrupt. He simply waits, his face patient and calm, as if he has all the time in the world to understand what brought Walter Jameson to his courtroom on this Tuesday morning. Case log, 9:45 a.m. Defendant, 93 years old. Citation, 38 miles per hour in 20-mile-per-hour zone. Ms. Reyes, the court clerk, stands at her station. She adjusts her reading glasses and lifts the file in front of her. Case number 2025 TR 9924. She announces State of Rhode Island versus Walter Jameson. The defendant is charged with speeding in a school zone.
Zone, 38 miles per hour in a posted 20 miles per hour zone. Citation issued on November 14th at 7:22 a.m. She sets the file down and glances at Walter, then at Caprio. Caprio thanks her and turns his attention back to Walter. "Mr. Jameson," Caprio says, "do you understand the charge against you?" "Yes, sir," Walter says quietly. "I was speeding. I know I was." "The citation says you were going 38 in a 20, Caprio says. "That's almost double the speed limit in a school zone. Can you help me understand why?" Walter's hands tighten on the edge of the table. He looks down at the citation in front of him, at the numbers printed there in black ink, at the officer's signature at the bottom. "I wasn't thinking about the speed," Walter says. I was just trying to get there." "Get where?" Caprio asks. Walter lifts his head slightly. His voice is still quiet, but there is an edge of desperation in it now. "The VA hospital," he says. "My son. He's at the VA." Caprio nods slowly. "Is your son sick?" Walter's jaw trembles. He nods once, a small, tight motion. "Yes, sir," he says. "He's been sick for a long time." Caprio's expression does not change, but something shifts in his eyes, a deepening of concern,
a recognition that there is more to this story than a simple speeding ticket. "What kind of sick?" Caprio asks gently. Walter does not answer immediately. He looks down at his hands again, at the way they shake, and then he looks back up at Caprio. "He has cancer," Walter says. "Stage 4. They've been treating it, but it's not working anymore." The courtroom is quiet. The woman in the third row has her hand pressed to her chest. The man near the aisle has lowered his head. Officer D'Angelo shifts his weight slightly, but does not speak. Timestamp 9:47 a.m. Defendant pauses for 14 seconds before answering. Caprio leans back in his chair. He does not look at the file. He does not look at the citation. He simply looks at Walter, at the way the old man stands with his shoulders hunched and his hands trembling, and he speaks with a gentleness that fills the courtroom. "Mr. Jameson," Caprio says, "how old is your son?" 71, Walter says. Caprio's eyebrows lift slightly. "And you're 93? "Yes, sir." "Do you still drive regularly?" Walter nods. "I have to. There's nobody else." Caprio tilts his head slightly. "Nobody else to do what?" Walter's voice cracks, just a little. "Nobody else to take care of him," he says. "His wife passed 6 years ago. His daughter lives in California. I'm all he has." Caprio does not speak for a moment. He simply sits there, his hands folded on the bench in front of him, his face lined with something that looks like both sorrow and respect. "So you're his caregiver?" Caprio says quietly. "Yes, sir," Walter says. "I am," Caprio nods slowly. "And on the morning you got this citation, you were driving to see him at the VA?" "Yes, sir." "Why that morning specifically?" Caprio asks. Walter's hands clench, his shoulders rise. His breathing becomes shallow and uneven. "They called me," he says. "The nurse, she said I should come now." Caprio's face remains calm, but his voice becomes even softer. "What did she mean by that?" he asks. Walter's eyes close briefly. When he opens them, tears spill over and run down his weathered cheeks. "She meant he might not make it through the day," Walter whispers. "Fear ages a man faster than time." The courtroom is silent. Not a single person moves. Not a single person speaks. The only sound is Walter's uneven breathing and the faint hum of the ventilation system. Caprio does not look away. He does not rush. He simply waits, letting Walter exist in the moment without pressure or judgment. After a long pause, Caprio speaks. "Mr. Jameson," he says gently, "let's talk about what happened that morning. Can you walk me through it?" Walter nods. He wipes his eyes with the back of his hand, but the tears do not stop. "I woke up at 4 in the morning, Walter says. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about him. I kept thinking, what if today is the day?" His voice breaks. "And then the phone rang. It was 6:11. I looked at the clock. I'll never forget it. 6:11 a.m. Caprio nods. "What did the nurse say?" Walter's hands shake harder now. He grips the table as if it is the only thing keeping him upright. "She said, 'Mr. Jameson, you should come now. Your son is asking for you.'" Walter's voice drops to barely a whisper. She said he was scared." Caprio's jaw tightens. He does not speak. He simply listens. "I got dressed as fast as I could," Walter continues. "I grabbed my keys. I didn't eat. I didn't drink coffee. I just got in the car and drove." "Where do you live?" Caprio asks. "West Side," Walter says. "About 12 miles from the VA. And you took the route through the school zone." Walter nods. "It's the fastest way. I know I shouldn't have. I know the speed limit, but I wasn't thinking about the limit. I was thinking about my boy." His voice cracks completely now. I was thinking about him lying in that bed asking for me, and me not being there. VA Nurse Call Log, 6:11 a.m. You should come now. Caprio stands. He does not step down from the bench yet, but he shifts his posture, leaning forward slightly, his hands resting on the wood in front of him. Mr. Jameson, he says gently. Is your son a veteran? Walter nods. Yes, sir. Vietnam, 2 tours. He was a Marine. Caprio's expression shifts again. Another layer of respect, another deepening of understanding. And now? He's at
VA receiving treatment for his cancer. Yes, sir. How long has he been there? Walter pauses. His mouth works silently for a moment before he finds the words. On and off for 3 years, he says. But this time they said there's nothing else they can do. They're just trying to keep him comfortable now. Caprio does not speak. He simply stands there looking at Walter, at the way the old man's shoulders shake, at the way his hands tremble against the table. Mr. Jameson, Caprio says quietly, you said you've buried 2 boys already. What did you mean by that? Walter's face crumples. He covers his mouth with one hand, his body shaking with silent sobs. It takes him several seconds to compose himself enough to speak. I had 3 sons, he says hoarsely. Michael died in a car accident in 1987. He was 32. James died of a heart attack in 2003. He was 49. His voice breaks completely. And now Robert, my youngest, he's dying too, and I can't stop it. I can't save him. The woman in the 3rd row is crying now. The man near the aisle has his head bowed, his hands pressed together as if in prayer. Officer D'Angelo's jaw is tight, his eyes fixed on Walter. Caprio steps down from the bench. He moves slowly, deliberately, his robes trailing behind him. He walks to the front of the courtroom and stops a few feet from Walter. Tell me exactly why you were rushing, Caprio says. Courtroom's silent, except for defendant breathing. Walter looks up at Caprio. His eyes are red and swollen. His face is lined with grief that has carved itself into his features over decades. Because I didn't want him to die alone, Walter says, his voice raw and broken. Because I'm 93 years old and I still drive, and I'm still the one who shows up. Because he called me that morning, not the nurse, but him. And he said, Dad, please hurry. Walter's entire body shakes now, his grief spilling out in waves that he can no longer contain. He said, Dad, I'm scared. Please don't let me go alone. And I said, I'm coming, son. I'm coming right now. And I got in that car and I drove as fast as I could because I couldn't let him wait. I couldn't let him be afraid and alone. He looks at Caprio, his face pleading. I know I broke the law, Your Honor. I know I was speeding. But I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times. Because he's my boy, and I'm his father. And that doesn't stop just because we're old. 5 seconds. 7. 10. 12. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of grief, full of love, full of the unbearable weight of a father who has already buried 2 sons and is watching his 3rd one slip away. Caprio does not speak immediately. He simply stands there, a few feet from Walter, his face lined with emotion, his eyes wet. Mr. Jameson, he says finally, his voice thick. Sit down, please. Walter shakes his head. I'm okay standing, sir. I'm not asking, Caprio says gently. I'm telling you, sit down. You don't owe this court anything, but you owe yourself a moment to breathe. Walter hesitates, then slowly lowers himself into the chair beside the defendant's table. His hands rest on his knees, still trembling. If this moment touched you, subscribe to Order in the Court so more people hear stories like this. Caprio pulls a chair from the side of the courtroom, and sits down across from Walter, not behind the bench, not standing above him, just sitting eye to eye, one man to another. "Did you make it to the hospital in time?" Caprio asks. Walter nods. "Yes, sir. I made it." "What happened when you got there?" Walter's voice is hoarse but steadier now. "I ran inside. I didn't care about the ticket. I didn't care about anything except getting to his room. And when I got there, he was awake. He was lying in that bed, and he looked so small, Your Honor. My boy looked so small." His voice breaks again. "And he saw me, and he smiled, and he said, 'You made it, Dad.' And I said, 'Of course I made it. I always make it.' And I held his hand, and we just sat there for hours, just holding hands." Caprio wipes his own eyes. He does not try to hide it. He simply lets the tears fall, because some moments are too human to pretend otherwise. "Is your son still alive, Mr. Jameson?" Caprio asks. Walter nods. "Yes, sir. He's still fighting. He's weak, but he's still here." "Because of you," Caprio says quietly. "Because you refused to let him be alone. Because you drove too fast through a school zone to make sure your son knew his father was coming." Court log. Judge off bench for 1 minute, 12 seconds. Caprio stands. He looks at Walter for a long moment, and then he speaks, his voice carrying across the courtroom. "Mr. Jameson," he says, "I want to make something very clear. You did break the law. You were speeding in a school zone, and that is dangerous. If there had been children in that zone, if something had happened, we would be having a very different conversation right now." Walter nods. "I know, sir. I know." "But," Caprio continues, his voice softening, "I also know that love makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. It makes them drive too fast. It makes them take risks. It makes them choose between following the law and following their heart. And in that moment, you chose your son." He pauses. "And I cannot in good conscience punish a 93-year-old father for refusing to let his dying son face his fear alone." The courtroom is silent. The woman in the third row is crying openly now. The man near the aisle has tears streaming down his face. Officer D'Angelo has his hand over his heart. Caprio turns to Ms. Reyes. "Ms. Reyes," he says, "please note in the record that the citation for case number 2025 TR 9924 is dismissed in full. No fine, no points, no record." Ms. Reyes nods, her own eyes wet. "Yes, Your Honor." Caprio turns back to Walter. "But I'm not done," he says. "This court is placing you under a different order, Mr. Jameson, and this one is not negotiable." Walter looks up, confused. "Sir." Caprio's voice is firm, but filled with warmth. "You are required, by order of this court, to visit your son today. And when you see him, you are going to tell him that Judge Caprio said he is the luckiest man in the world, because he has a father who at 93 years old still drives too fast to make sure his son is never alone." Walter's face crumples. He covers his eyes with both hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Caprio steps forward and places his hand on Walter's shoulder. "And you tell him," Caprio continues, his voice thick with emotion, "that the judge also said this: a father's love outruns any law. And yours, Mr. Jameson, is the fastest love I've ever seen." Walter cannot speak. He simply sits there, his hands covering his face, his body shaking with the kind of grief and relief that can only come when a burden you've been carrying alone is finally acknowledged by someone else. Caprio does not move. He stands with his hand on Walter's shoulder, letting the old man cry without interruption or judgment. After a long moment, Walter lowers his hands, His face is wet, his eyes red. But there is something else in his expression now, something that looks like gratitude. "Thank you, Your Honor," Walter whispers. "Thank you." Caprio nods. "You don't need to thank me. You just need to go see your boy." Walter stands slowly, his legs shaky. Officer D'Angelo steps forward and offers his arm for support. Walter takes it, and together they walk toward the courtroom doors. As Walter reaches the exit, he stops. He turns back to look at Caprio, and for a moment, the two men simply look at each other across the courtroom. A 93-year-old father and a judge who chose compassion over procedure. "Your Honor," Walter says, his voice still but stronger now. "If speeding means I got to say goodbye to my boy, I'd do it again every time." Caprio nods. "I know you would. That's what makes you a good father." Walter nods once, and then he is gone. The courtroom doors closing softly behind him. The gallery sits in silence for several seconds. Then slowly, one person begins to clap. Then another. Then another. Within moments, the entire courtroom is applauding,
Not loudly, but with a kind of respectful, heartfelt appreciation that says they have witnessed something rare and precious. Caprio does not acknowledge the applause. He simply returns to the bench, picks up his pen, and prepares for the next case. But his eyes are still wet. Should elderly caregivers receive special compassion in court? Tell us below. Clerk note, defendant wipes eyes with trembling hands. The video of the hearing is uploaded to the Order in the Court YouTube channel 3 days later. Within 12 hours, it has 3 million views. Within 3 days, it has 20 million. Within a week, it has been viewed over 50 million times and shared across every major news outlet in the country. Comments flood in from around the world. "I'm a hospice nurse. This is every family I've ever worked with. Thank you, Judge Caprio, for seeing them. My father drove me to the hospital when I was dying. He ran every red light. I'm alive because he refused to slow down. This is what justice looks like when it's guided by humanity." The story spreads beyond YouTube. News networks pick it up, radio hosts discuss it, podcasts analyze it. Walter Jameson becomes overnight a symbol of parental love that refuses to quit, even when the odds are impossible. Letters arrive at the courthouse, hundreds of them, then thousands. People send donations in Walter's name. Veterans organizations reach out. The VA announces a new initiative, Emergency Caregiver Support for Elderly Parents Caring for Sick Veterans. 3 weeks after the hearing, Walter returns to Providence Municipal Court. He walks in slowly, his steps careful but steady. Officer D'Angelo greets him at the door with a smile and a handshake. "Good to see you, Mr. Jameson," Officer D'Angelo says. "Good to be seen," Walter replies quietly. Caprio is on the bench when Walter enters. He looks up from the file he is reading, and his face breaks into a warm smile. "Mr. Jameson," Caprio says, "this is a pleasant surprise. What brings you back?" Walter walks to the front of the courtroom. He stands at the same spot where he stood 3 weeks ago, but this time his hands do not tremble. This time his shoulders are not hunched. This time he looks Caprio in the eye. "I wanted to thank you properly, Your Honor," Walter says, "and I wanted to tell you something." "What's that?" Caprio asks. Walter's voice is steady now, clear and strong. "My boy is still alive," he says. "He's weak, he's in pain, but he's still fighting. And he told me to come here and tell you something." Caprio leans forward. "What did he want you to tell me?" Walter's eyes fill with tears, but this time they are not tears of grief. They are tears of gratitude. "He said to tell you that the story you told, the one about the judge who understood why a father drives too fast, that story gave him hope. He said it reminded him that the world still has good people in it,
And he said he's going to keep fighting as long as he can because his father never stopped running toward him. Caprio's face crumples. He lowers his head for a moment, his hand covering his mouth. When he looks up again, his eyes are wet. "How is he doing?" Caprio asks quietly. Walter smiles, a small, fragile smile, but a real one. "Still here, Your Honor," Walter says. "Still alive. And as long as he's alive, I'll keep showing up." Caprio nods. "That's all any of us can do. Show up, keep trying, refuse to quit." He stands and steps down from the bench. He walks to Walter and extends his hand. Walter takes it, and the two men shake a firm, respectful handshake that says more than words ever could. "You're a good father, Mr. Jameson," Caprio says. "Your son is lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Walter replies. "I still have time with him. Every day is a gift." Caprio nods. "Then don't waste a single one." Walter smiles. "I won't, Your Honor. I promise." 18 months later, Robert Jameson, Walter's son, passes away peacefully in his sleep at the VA hospital. Walter is beside him, holding his hand. The funeral is small, but attended by dozens of people. Walter has never met people who saw the video, people who were moved by the story, people who wanted to honor a father who never stopped trying and a son who never stopped fighting. Judge Frank Caprio attends the funeral. He does not speak publicly. He simply stands in the back, pays his respects, and leaves quietly. But before he goes, he places a small card on the memorial table. It reads, "Robert Jameson was lucky. He had a father who drove too fast to make sure his son was never alone. The world should have more fathers like Walter and more sons like Robert. Rest in peace." Walter finds the card later that day. He reads it, folds it carefully, and places it in his wallet. He carries it with him every day for the rest of his life. 3 years after the funeral, Walter Jameson passes away in his sleep at the age of 96. He is buried beside his 3 sons, Michael, James, and Robert, in a quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Providence. At his funeral, Judge Frank Caprio delivers the eulogy. He speaks about love. He speaks about sacrifice. He speaks about a 93-year-old man who drove too fast through a school zone because his son needed him. "Walter Jameson taught me something," Caprio says, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "He taught me that the law is important, but love is stronger. He taught me that justice is not just about punishment, it's about understanding. It's about recognizing that sometimes the people who break the rules are the ones who need compassion the most." He pauses, looking out at the people gathered in the church. Walter broke the speed limit, but he never broke his promise to his son, and that, I believe, is what matters most. The church is silent. People wipe their eyes, heads bow in respect. Caprio finishes with a story. "The last time I saw Walter," he says, "he told me something I'll never forget. He said, 'Judge, I don't know how much time I have left, but I know this. Every second I spent with my boy was worth it. Every mile I drove too fast was worth it. Every risk I took was worth it. Because love doesn't count the cost. It just runs.'" Caprio's voice cracks. Walter ran his entire life. He ran toward his sons. He ran toward his duty. He ran toward love. And he never, ever stopped. He looks down at the casket. "Rest now, Walter. You've earned it. Your boys are waiting." If this story moved you, subscribe to Case Closed. Some stories deserve to be heard. Years later, law students study the case, not for its legal precedent, but for its moral clarity. They debate it in classrooms. They write papers about it. They ask the question that Caprio asked himself that day. When does compassion override the letter of the law? The answer, most agree, is this:
When the law forgets that it exists to serve people, not to punish them. When the law forgets that behind every citation, every ticket, every case number, there is a human story. And sometimes, that story is more important than the rule. Walter Jameson drove 38 miles per hour in a 20-mile-per-hour school zone. He broke the law, but he also did something that no law can measure. He showed up for his son when his son needed him most. And in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, that truth meant everything. Because compassion isn't a loophole here, it's the heart of justice. Walter's story proved what Judge Caprio has shown for decades. Love outruns fear. Love outruns circumstance. And sometimes, love even outruns the law. This moment wasn't just a ruling, it was a reminder of the legacy Judge Caprio leaves behind. A legacy built on humanity, dignity, and the courage to listen before judging. Before you go, hit subscribe to Case Closed, where we honor that legacy through powerful stories like this. Stories that show the world what justice looks like when it's led not just by rules, but by heart. Case Closed, keeping Judge Caprio's legacy alive, one story at a time.